Yo, what is going on, guys? Today I'm going to be recording my NFL video for week 1. It feels good to be making NFL videos again. I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of people, but NFL season finally here. It's definitely one of the best just parts about DFS is during the NFL season. There's just so much money out there to be won. Just a lot of fun, just sweating the games on Sunday. And it feels good to be back making some NFL videos. Before we get started, just want to talk about what I plan on doing this NFL season. So obviously I'm recording this video pretty early. I'm actually recording it Sunday, September 2nd, about a week before, obviously next week, so a week before NFL season starts. I plan on recording my NFL videos from here on out, like every Monday or Tuesday. Get them out somewhat early, just give some of my early thoughts on just the upcoming slate. Talk about some of the guys I feel like I'm going to be heavy on. Something I didn't do enough last year that I'm going to try and do this year is be more active on Twitter. So if you guys do want to follow me on Twitter, at the DFS_GOAT, you can follow me there. Just going to try and be active on Twitter, talk about the slate as the week goes on. Maybe if I get high on some guys and I feel like I'm going to have a lot of exposure to certain players, I'll be sure to mention them on Twitter. But for now, with these videos, going to give some of my early thoughts on the slate. Just talk about some of the guys I like, go through each position, talk about some of the plays I like up top. If there's mid-tier plays, I'll talk about them, and if there's value at each position, I'll be sure to touch on that as well. But before we do get started, guys, would really appreciate it if you would give the video a like. I know we're going to have a lot of new viewers coming in for NFL. Thank you for clicking on the video, guys. If you are new to the channel, if this is your first time checking a video out on my channel, thank you so much for clicking on the video. Be sure you do hit that subscribe button down below. Going to be uploading these videos every week for you guys, so would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Look up top at quarterback today. For this upcoming slate, we do have Tom Brady, who is leading the pack today. He gets a great matchup at home against the Texans, and I absolutely love Tom Brady here. At 7,200, that just feels a little bit underpriced, or Brady just feels a little bit underpriced. He is going to be one of my core plays for this week. As we go, I'll plug in some guys that I really like in my core. I'll be sure to touch on other players as well. We'll talk about other quarterbacks, but Brady for me is a quarterback that I feel like I'm going to have a ton of exposure to. Really do like Deshaun Watson on the other side of that game as well. This Houston-New England game has one of the higher totals on this slate. We're definitely going to want exposure to both sides. Obviously love Brady, love Deshaun Watson as well. If you want to save $500 and go down to Deshaun Watson, especially like in tournaments, I think that makes a ton of sense today. Definitely like Watson at 6,700. Big Ben gets a pretty good matchup against Cleveland, but Big Ben is on the road. We know Big Ben just in the past, throughout the years, has struggled on the road, or at least just hasn't performed as well on the road. And when he's $100 less than Watson, I think I'd rather just play Watson for 6,700. So those are kind of the quarterbacks I like up top. I think quarterback, you either kind of pay up top or you kind of look for value. I think there is value this week. If we look cheap, look down in the value tier. Andy Dalton, he has a good matchup, 5,800 against the Colts in Indianapolis. That's a good spot for Andy Dalton. Wish he was a little bit cheaper, but at 5,800, I could see wanting to go to Dalton this week. I think he makes a lot of sense. Blake Bortles, 5,600, good matchup against the Giants. Don't mind Blake Bortles as well. If you're looking for some cheap value, he could be a guy you do look to consider. Looking like sub 5K, we know Jameis Winston's going to be suspended. Fitzpatrick will most likely be starting for the Buccaneers, so at 5K, you got Ryan Fitzpatrick in a high total game against the Saints. He could be a guy you look to for value. I've seen a lot of people talk about Tyrod Taylor. I'm not sure what his price is. Let's go ahead and look him up real quickly. He was pretty cheap, I believe. Yeah, 5,400. Tyrod Taylor gets a matchup at home against the Steelers, what could potentially be a shootout, or at least Cleveland could potentially be playing from behind. Tyrod Taylor at 5,400. I feel like a guy some people might go to if you're trying to go cheap. I could see wanting to consider him. But I think my favorite value play would probably be Dalton. I do like Andy Dalton here at 5,800. Just that matchup against the Colts, I really like for Andy Dalton. He's definitely a guy I feel like I'm going to be heavy on if I go a little bit cheaper at quarterback. But up top, that tier of Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, I just really like those two guys up top. I will definitely try and fit them in. There's probably going to be plenty of value, especially at receiver. I'm seeing a lot of value at receiver. You should easily be able to pay up for quarterback if you want to do that. And Brady and Watson are kind of my two favorite plays up top. But let's go ahead and move on to running back. Obviously, guys, I'm not going to be able to touch on every single player. I don't want the video to be too long. If you do have guys that you really like, you want to mention them down in the comments, feel free to do that. I'm going to be reading the comments just every day, looking at comments. So if you have any things you want to say, feel free to comment them down below. But looking at running back, looking up top here, we obviously have Le'Veon Bell, who is probably going to be the most expensive running back every week that he's on the slate. He's 9,400, gets a matchup against the Browns. This is a good spot for Le'Veon Bell, but I do like Alvin Kamara a ton, and I think Alvin Kamara, especially if you're trying to get away from Bell, I feel like Bell's going to be a lot more popular than Kamara. I love Kamara here at 8,500. He's another guy in my core that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to this week. We already know that Mark Ingram's going to be suspended, so Kamara is going to be looking at a heavy workload here. Goal line work definitely concerns me. When they get to the goal line, if they're going to leave Kamara in or bring in one of their backups. I know they cut somebody. I can't remember who it was. Let me pull up New England's running backs real quick. I think it was Williams, Jamal Williams. I believe that's his name. Or no, Jonathan Williams. They did waive him. They cut him. So he's not going to be in the roster, in the depth chart. I believe it's going to be Boston Scott, who's going to be the backup to Kamara. But Kamara, either way, should be looking at a heavy workload. Whether he gets the goal line work or not, I still think he's going to be able to pay off this price tag, especially on DraftKings with it being full PPR. We know Kamara gets a ton of work in the passing game. It's just a great play here. It's a high total game. The Saints are at home where they always put up a ton of points. Love Kamara. He's one of my favorite plays, if not my favorite play on this slate overall. I know he's probably going to be popular, but I'm still going to have a ton of exposure to him. Going to be playing a lot of tournaments this year. Last year I played a lot of cash games, but probably going to shy away from cash just in general and really look to tournaments. And Kamara in tournaments, if I make like 10, 20 lineups, he's going to be in at least probably half of them. I just love Kamara in general. And obviously David Johnson, you can't go wrong with him, but if I'm paying up for a running back this week, Kamara is going to be my guy. Leonard Fournette at 7,100, did want to mention him. He just seems underpriced just for the guy that gets the kind of work that he does. 7,100, I could easily see playing Leonard Fournette in cash games with just how much work he gets with his price tag. He just makes too much sense in cash. Even as an RB2 in tournaments, if you want to play Kamara and Fournette in tournaments, I think that makes a ton of sense as well. But maybe looking down to this mid-tier, Christian McCaffrey I always have interest in, especially on DraftKings. With it being full PPR, I think McCaffrey going to be just poised for a breakout year with the Panthers. We know Jonathan Stewart no longer on this team, so McCaffrey should be looking at a heavy workload. I do like McCaffrey in that mid-range if you want to consider him. Joe Mixon, I'm hearing a lot of talk about Joe Mixon, how he's going to be poised for a breakout year. He does get a good matchup here against the Colts at 6,100. Joe Mixon in that mid-range, another guy I would definitely be considering. Jared McKinnon, we know, got injured. He's going to be probably out for a while with the 49ers. I believe, he did tear his ACL. We look at the 49ers, their running back depth chart. Obviously, it's not a good matchup against the Vikings, but if we look at who the 49ers could be starting, it could be Matt Breida. He could see a heavy workload with McKinnon out. He's cheap at 4,600, but obviously the matchup is terrible against the Vikings. Don't know if we really need to go there, especially with the value that we have at receiver. I think receiver might be the position we kind of want to save. So running back, I'm really trying to spend up here. I don't like a lot of value here. Obviously, Bell, Kamara, David Johnson are kind of the guys I really like. Fournette seems underpriced, 7,100. McCaffrey in this mid-range, Joe Mixon in this mid-range. These are the kind of guys I'm looking at running back. Don't love the value here. Like I said, we'll talk about receiver value. I think that's a position we want to go cheap at. So let's go ahead and move on to receiver. We know the top options here are going to be the same guys we talk about every week. Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas. These are going to be guys we're talking about every week. Brown, obviously, against Cleveland. If you're not playing Le'Veon Bell, then you should probably have some exposure to Antonio Brown because Brown's just such a good receiver. I think Bell's obviously like a better overall play that you can probably project for higher points. But in tournaments, I do like Antonio Brown. You can't really go wrong with Antonio Brown. He's in play pretty much every week. Same with DeAndre Hopkins, especially like if you're game stacking that Houston-New England game. If you're going to play maybe Deshaun Watson, Hopkins, if you want to pair them together, I do really like that combo. Hopkins, I would say, is probably my favorite play up top, especially in tournaments because Antonio Brown he always gets ownership. He's usually always the highest owned when it comes to the top receivers. I do really like Hopkins as sort of a pivot away from Antonio Brown, who's going to be pretty popular. In this mid-tier, I think this is where I see a lot of guys that I like. Odell Beckham has a tough matchup against the Jaguars, but $7K for Odell Beckham, really like him in tournaments. I will probably be somewhat heavy on him. I don't know what his ownership will be. I'd imagine it's going to be sub 10%, like 8-9% owned for Odell Beckham. So I'm going to have probably at least 15-20%. If I make 20 lineups, I might have Beckham in like 4 or 5 just because 7K for Odell Beckham. I know the matchup's tough, but the guy just has so much talent. Even with the tough matchup against Ramsey, Beckham could still come through here. Just the price tag is what's really gets me onto him at 7K. Just seems a little bit underpriced. But a guy that sticks out to me, this mid-range, pairing him with Tom Brady, Chris Hogan's probably going to be another popular receiver a lot of people look at. But he just makes too much sense here. It's a great matchup against the Texans. Hogan's going to be looking at a heavy workload. No Julian Edelman. We know Hogan going to be the number one receiver, going to see a ton of targets. Him and Gronk are just going to see a ton of targets from Brady. On Hogan at 6,100 just seems too cheap. Not sure if salaries came out before Edelman got suspended or whatever. But either way, Hogan's underpriced at 6,100 for no Edelman. He should be looking at least 9-10 targets, I would say. And obviously has upside, double-digit, or 2 touchdown upside. And double-digit targets could easily be there. Love Hogan, love pairing him with Brady in tournaments. Just think that makes a ton of sense. Hogan's by far like my favorite play in that mid-tier, in that 6K range. Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy that has a ton of upside as well. Against Cleveland, I know he went off a ton last year against Cleveland when they played. So at 5,900, especially in tournaments, because Hogan's going to be so popular. If you want to get away from Hogan as a pivot, I do like Juju Smith-Schuster at 5,900. But the value, this is what we really need to talk about at receiver. So we'll just first off pull up the New England depth chart, or their receivers at least, DraftKings-wise. We know Edelman's going to be out. Jordan Matthews, I don't believe is going to be playing for the Patriots this year. I know Kenny Britt got cut as well. Philip Dorsett's going to be a player a lot of people look to this week, and I think he makes a lot of sense. At 3,700, he is expected to be the number 2 receiver for the Patriots. And although Gronk and Chris Hogan are going to get a lot of targets, Dorsett should be looking at some targets as well. He's just too cheap for the volume that he should get. In cash games, I think he makes a lot of sense. In tournaments, just as a cheap receiver you could go to, I think he makes sense as well. Love Dorsett as a value receiver. Definitely one of my favorite value receivers. Now going to Jacksonville. If we look at Jacksonville, if I can find them, they're another team that's going to be pretty thin at receiver. Marquise Lee put on injured reserve. Not going to be playing for this game against the Giants. So Moncrief, Westbrook, Keelan Cole, these are all guys we could consider for value. But my favorite here is definitely Keelan Cole. We saw last year when Marquise Lee was out, Keelan Cole put up some big games. Just showed a lot of upside. He's a good deep ball threat. Just has big upside in general when it comes to fantasy. If you're wanting more targets, if you're wanting a safer play, I'd say go to D.D. Westbrook. But if you want the guy that has upside, that has big play potential, I think Keelan Cole is that guy. 3,800, he just has so much potential to blow value on this price tag. He could easily get 15, 20 DraftKings points, 80 yards and a touchdown, or just an 80-yard touchdown in general from Keelan Cole is definitely possible here. He's another guy I have a ton of interest in at receiver for value, and obviously Philip Dorsett, 3,700 as well from the Patriots. Another guy I like for value at receiver. So yeah, receiver position, I really like the value. Obviously, I talked about that. Let's go ahead and move on to tight end. And this is another position I really like to go cheap at. Do have like a core play from here that I'm going to be pretty heavy on. We'll talk about in a second. But just focusing on the top guys, you obviously have Gronk up top, who's a great play. Against the Texans with no Edelman, Gronk's going to get a ton of targets here, just going to see a ton of volume. I really like pairing Brady with Hogan. Obviously, I'll have some Brady, Gronkowski stacks in tournaments as well. But since I went with Hogan and Brady as sort of my pairing, don't have much interest, at least in putting Gronkowski in the core. So we'll look to go a little bit cheaper at tight end. This is another position I try and like to find some value. There's some matchups we like to look to. Versus the Giants and versus the Browns, you can definitely play tight ends versus those two teams. So looking at the Jaguars, they are playing the Giants this week. The Giants are one of the worst teams when it comes to defending the tight end. Really like Austin Seferian-Jenkins here. With no Marquise Lee, the tight ends, ASJ should be looking at some more targets as well. And with this matchup versus the Giants, with ASJ's price tag of 3,200, I think he's a really good value play here. If you're looking for a cheap option at tight end, he's another guy I'm going to be pretty heavy on. Just this Jacksonville passing game I really like just because of how thin they are. A lot of these guys who are cheap should see plenty of targets. Keelan Cole being one of them, ASJ being one of them as well. Do like ASJ as a cheap tight end. Also, Vance McDonald, if he plays for the Steelers, I got to see if I can find him. Let's see what his price tag is. Let's see. 3,200, same price as ASJ. Vance McDonald, if he is able to go for the Steelers, he gets another great matchup here versus the Browns. The Browns are another team that really struggles to defend the tight end. We're going to be playing tight ends versus the Browns, tight ends versus the Giants. You're going to hear that a lot this year, but it's just a thing. It always works out. These two teams, when it comes to defending the tight end, two of the worst teams in the league. So I like ASJ as a cheap tight end, like Vance McDonald, if he's able to play, like him as well as a cheap tight end at 3,200. Those are kind of my favorite tight ends. I like to go cheap at this position in general, and those are the guys I'm really focused on. Obviously, Gronk up top is playable every week, but I'm looking for the value here. So let's go ahead and move on to defense. Talk about this position real quick. Usually this is another position I try and like to pay down a little bit. I like paying up at running back. I like paying up at receiver, sometimes quarterback as well. Tight end and defense are always a position I think I can find value. So just looking at some of the value in this mid-range, I think like the Panthers against the Cowboys at home. I think the Cowboys are going to struggle a lot this year. So at 3,200, the Panthers in a good matchup at home. Probably one of my favorite defenses, just first glances. Up top, the Jaguars get a good matchup against Eli Manning, who will turn the ball over plenty, who will definitely take sacks. So the Jaguars, if I'm paying up, might be my favorite play at 3,700. But like I said, the Panthers at 3,200 at home against the Cowboys, a team I have a ton of interest in. Usually like targeting defenses at home, but you can definitely take defenses on the road as long as the matchup's good. So maybe looking for some of these cheaper defenses we could consider. Blake Bortles is a guy that turns the ball over a ton. There's always pick six potential taking a defense against the Jaguars. So the Giants, a cheap option, 2,600 versus Bortles. Don't mind them if you want to go down there. But like the Panthers at 3,200 are definitely my favorite defense that just really sticks out to me this week. That's probably the defense I'm going to have the most exposure to. And I don't want to mention too many defenses, kind of the Jaguars, the Patriots, the Giants. Those are the teams I'm really focused on. So I think that's it for defense, and I think that's it for the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy the video. Let me know if you have any feedback. Feel free to leave it down in the comments. If you like the way I do the videos, going through each position, talking about some of my plays. Looks like the video was about 18 minutes, which is good. I don't want to make these videos too long. I'm going to try and keep them under 20 minutes just every week. Don't want to keep you guys for too long, but definitely want to give you enough information, enough analysis to where, the video is helpful. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like if you did. If you are new, like I said at the beginning, make sure you hit that subscribe button before you get out of here. Would really appreciate it. And if you have comments, questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. You can also talk to me on Twitter. DM me on Twitter if you have any questions. My DMs are always open at the DFS_GOAT. You can DM me there. But yeah, guys, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. I do really appreciate it, guys. And good luck on this Week 1 slate. Peace.